Hello, I'm Greg Ligon with Leadership Network, and we're here today for another one of our conversations. Today I'm talking with Todd Mullins, who's the lead pastor at Christ Fellowship Church, Palm Beach Gardens. This is where their original campus is. They've got campuses all around that area of Florida, serving around 30,000 people in that space. And really excited to have Todd, have you here with us today, and would love to have you say a little bit more about yourself and about the church. Kind of tell us a little bit of the story about Christ Fellowship.
Absolutely, Greg. It's great to be with you guys, and excited about what God's doing here, excited about what God's doing everywhere all over our country and the world. Yes, I'm lead pastor at Christ Fellowship. I am married to my 7th grade sweetheart. We've been sweethearts since middle school. Her name is Julie. We have one son. His name is Jefferson, and he's involved just volunteering in children's and students and playing in the bands, having a great time. So we're doing ministry together, which is kind of a play on what's been happening my whole life here. Christ Fellowship started in my parents' living room as a Bible study with really no intent to be a church. My dad didn't want to start a church or plant a church, but it kind of God threw it on us, and we said, okay, we're going to do this. My dad is an old football coach, athletic director, and so he quit all that and started to plant a church back in the 80s. So the church is coming up on being 30 years old. Julie and I have been on the team here for 26 of those 30 years, 27 of those 30 years, so most of the time. But yeah, we were real small in the beginning, real small for quite some time. Met in a school for 7 years in a cafeteria. It didn't grow very much, and it was like maybe the backside of the mountain, God getting us ready for what he wanted to do through us. And we came to a place where we just said, God, we'll be faithful to you with these 70, 80, 90 people. If that's all we ever have, we're going to be faithful to you. And soon after that, the doors just opened up, and we got our first building, which was an old horse barn, converted that into a worship facility. It grew from 80 people to 4,000 people on 4 acres of land. Really crazy season. We then built another building, then went multi-site, and today we've got 7 physical campuses around the South Florida area, and we're launching a campus up in New York City in just a couple weeks. We're also opening a campus up in an old Dillard store that we bought, and we're converting that. That opens up on just the week before Easter. So we're excited about reaching some more people for Jesus.
That's very exciting. Great story. And Todd, I know you and your team have been involved with our What's Next leadership community that we launched back in the fall. It's churches that are great things are going on, but there are new chapters they're wanting to write in their story. And so Todd and the team have been a part of that. You mentioned the campus that you're going to be launching in New York City. That's one of the parts of your next chapter of your story as you look at launching campuses outside of the South Florida region. But I know there's some other things that you've been working on that are exciting, that are kind of breaking some new ground for you and your team. And I think probably will for some of the churches that are having the opportunity to listen in as well. So share a little bit about some of those. I know one of the big initiatives is this whole area of Serve, and I would love to hear some more about that.
Yeah, I think what's great about, I'll just do a plug for this What's Next community. It's really been good to force our leadership team, senior leadership team, to all be involved in processing through what places are stuck in the church, what places are stuck in ministry, and how do we work on those, and what's next that we need to really focus on. And just the discipline of coming together every 6 months, and you guys do a great job of holding us accountable to the homework we need to do and work on. It's really moving some things that we've been wanting to move for a while off the dime and into process. One of those has been volunteerism. All churches have volunteers. All churches love their volunteers. All churches need their volunteers. And at Christ Fellowship, we've had a great volunteer culture through the years, always have, but we realized that in the past couple of years, it's been a little bit different of a scenario. We've had, I think a lot of times it's easy to fall into that, 80-20 principle, where 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. And you see, as your church gets larger and larger, people can very easily sit on the outside and look in. They can come and attend, but not really participate. And so we really wanted to take an initiative. How do we help people get off the bench and get in the game and really be a part of what God is wanting to do in their lives. More than just filling warm bodies in positions where we need them in ministries, really helping them discover their effectiveness, discover their gifts, their calling, and their passion, and how they are such a vital part of being a part of what God is wanting to do on the earth, building church, building God's kingdom. And so that was our heart behind it. Through this journey, what we've done is we've identified a few misconceptions, especially as churches get larger. Two of them that popped out was that people really think, well, man, the church is so big, they don't need me. And so I addressed that from the pulpit one week, and I said, a lot of you think, this church is so big, it doesn't matter if I'm a part of it. You don't need me. And the truth is, our vision is so big, and what God's called us to is so big that we desperately need you. And that if you don't step up and be who God's called you to be, we will never be who we're called to be as a church. Really in an inspirational kind of way, challenge them to step up and be a part. I think people really need to feel needed. They need to feel that what they can bring can really add value. And so we spent some time teaching on that. We also, the second misconception that we heard a lot about is, a lot of times churches do things with excellence, or they have a real core value of doing things well, and people see that and they think, well, there's nothing I can add to that. You guys got it going on. And what we really wanted to let them know is, if it looks like something's going on, it's because there's thousands of volunteers that are serving and giving and loving. And so the first thing we really had to do was break some old mindsets and help people maybe see this differently about what to do. As a church, in the past, we used to do ministry fairs. I think Saddleback probably made the ministry fair thing great and popular, and it worked for us in the past. But as our church grew in size, we noticed that a lot of times ministries weren't ready to take in 100 new volunteers in their one ministry. And so people were falling off and dropping between the cracks and getting frustrated and not feeling like they were really needed. And so we knew that we had to start with our staff. And we sent a couple teams out to some churches that really do volunteer culture well. North Point, obviously, they were gracious enough to let us tag along for a weekend and watch what they do with their volunteers. Another great church is Chris Hodges, senior pastor of in Birmingham, Church of the Highlands. Great church, great, healthy volunteer culture. And so again, we knew we needed to start with our staff team. And we had a 2-day staff conference that we had never done before on just building healthy volunteer culture. We stopped everything, had everybody stop everything for a few days around that, had the main sessions that I taught and our lead team taught. And then we had breakout sessions on everything from how to create great volunteer job descriptions and how to do great training and equipping and how to create great team culture and environment. And our team really loved being resourced on something that's so important and such a part of our call of equipping the saints for acts of service, helping them reach their potential. And so over the weeks following the conference, had them write out volunteer job descriptions for current volunteers they had them dream about what positions they wish they had, what roles they could use. I challenged them. They said, if you think you've got enough volunteers, your vision isn't big enough. I don't want you in the lead role because you're not dreaming big enough. You're not seeing what God could do. I really forced them to dream. And so they wrote all their job descriptions, turned in their training resources. And then we knew once we had the staff ready that we were ready now to go to the church. And so we also, in this season of being together in the What's Next leadership community, we realized as a senior leadership team that we had to dedicate some resource to this, that if this was really going to get off the ground and flourish, then we had to put the money where our mouth is and what we're wanting and set some budget dollars aside to hire some people to actually look after this volunteer culture, some dedicated staff. And we had to really make sure that our team didn't think that these people were the volunteer recruiters, because that's everybody's job. Everybody's, inviting people to serve and jump in and be a part. But these people were there just to make sure that teams didn't get stuck, that background checks were happening, that training opportunities were taking place, really just keeping the recruiting and the releasing of volunteers on the front burner. And so after we got all the system in place behind the scenes, then we started going out to the church family. And we started with our volunteers. And we told them, we said, listen, you're already serving, so nothing's changing for you. You might hear a different emphasis about serve team and being a part of a serve team, but you're already on a serve team. So all we want you to do is just recruit one more person to bring them along with you to serve. And then from that, we went into the congregation and launched a serve initiative under a sermon series called Team CF. CF stands for Christ Fellowship. And we launched it right as the Olympics were getting going. So it had, there's a lot of playoffs that we could do with what was going on in the world. We talked about the power of team and how God created them to be a part of the team. And we had big serve after parties after every service on the weekends. And ministries knew how many open positions they had. And when somebody stepped up and said, hey, I'd like to learn more about student ministries, then they were ready with, hey, we've already got the equipping training night is coming up next week. And there's another one 2 weeks later. If you can't make that one, our teams were prepared to receive the people that were actually going to step up and show interest as a response to a 3-week series on being a part of God's team. It was really Team Jesus, being a part of what God's called us to do. And Greg, it was great because in that 4 to 6 week window following it, we've seen over 2,000 new volunteers sign up, get connected in a ministry, clearly understand what their role is, what's expected of them, and really how they're going to be equipped to do what God's called them to do. So really that one thing, which was the top goal of our team coming out of the What's Next First community group, was we've got to figure out a way to energize and systematize volunteerism in the church so we can flourish again and not just be maybe flourishing in pockets, but not flourishing everywhere. So we're really on the track to getting there.
That's awesome. Man, that's my next question is going to be, how do you measure success? Well, 2,000 new volunteers is a pretty incredible impact. As you think, as you've got that, now you've got these new volunteers that are in place, you've got some of your systems in place. Anything that you've learned in particular about how do you keep that, now that you've got these new 2,000 people in place, anything you've learned about how to kind of keep that momentum going? How do you make sure those people stay connected? And they're not just responding, if you would, to the inspiration that comes from a great sermon series.
Right.
What are some of the things you've learned that you're putting in place that will help to make that really sticky for them as well?
That's good. One of the core pieces of this for us has been keeping it on the front burner of our staff. So we have weekly staff meetings where we come together from all our campuses, everybody from all the pastors to the secretaries to the janitors. We come together, we worship together, pray together, and then we share good reports on what's happening across the campuses, and we teach a leadership lesson. Probably most churches do that. If you're not doing that, I would encourage you to do it. It is the number one way that we keep the culture strong at our church. In those times, we are celebrating volunteers. We're celebrating what the volunteers are doing. We're keeping this alive in the hearts of our staff, and then they're carrying it out, in the lives of their teams. The second thing we're doing is we were able to dedicate some staff to this so that they're making sure the teams are having their training sessions, that they're making sure that the job descriptions are updated, that they haven't dropped any balls along the way, and just having that extra resource to think after, because the truth is, and we're all racing from weekend to weekend. We all got a lot of things going on. It's easy for this to fall off the radar of equipping and preparing people to serve. So that's probably been the number one thing, is that we've dedicated the staff and then the staff time to focus on it. We took things off their plates so that they could do a better job of leading their volunteers, coaching their volunteers, spiritually looking after their volunteers. We had our campus pastors really sit down with them and go through, okay, don't do this because it's more important that you spend time with your volunteers. And so those have been some of the things that we've learned to keep it alive, keep it healthy. Coming up in a couple months, we're going to have a whole weekend that's dedicated to like a volunteer appreciation weekend. Instead of having, we normally every quarter have a thing we call Infuse, which is a gathering of all our volunteers from all our campuses. And we'll have a couple thousand volunteers show up, which obviously isn't all our volunteers, but it's a Friday night event. It's who can come. And it's all about celebrating them and casting vision for what's next. We decided to take a full weekend and do that not on a Friday night, but over Saturday and Sunday services, and celebrate it in the services, because then that highlights it in front of the people that aren't serving, really what we value and what we celebrate. So that's coming up in a couple months as well. So trying to keep it in the front of the church.
That's great. I know we mentioned at the front end of the conversation that you're launching this new campus in New York City. Any kind of initial kind of learnings? I know you're still you don't launch until Easter, and you've got some families that have moved up there that felt called to go and be a part of that. As you're looking forward to launching this in a few weeks, what are some of the early learnings for you?
Yeah, we're learning a lot through this process. As a church, we never planned to launch outside of our region. It wasn't in our heart. We had a heart for this region. We know other great churches that are launching all over the nation and internationally. That just wasn't something that was in my spirit. But this past fall, on a trip to New York City, tied in with our Hillsong conference that we went to, God really birthed in our heart a burden for New York City and the people that lived up there. We tried to shake it. We couldn't shake it. We came home and prayed and realized God was calling us to plant this campus. So starting in December is really when we started the formal gathering of people up there and really announcing it. We didn't announce it till December. So in the last few months, we've been getting team up there, building relationships with people that know about us up there. But it's really forcing us as a church to think differently about how we launch campus. Because if we were to launch another campus 20 minutes or 30 minutes away from where we are now, we have a system for that. We know how to do that. We don't know how to do this. And it's making us rethink everything we're doing. The things we thought were so important to be a part of campus, we're now saying, is that really critical to be a part of the campus up there? I believe that by God forcing us to go through this process and think differently, and it's preparing us as a church to be a little bit more lean. We're able to, as a leadership team, maybe to not be so cumbersome with some of the things that we're maybe expecting of campuses or expecting campuses to do. And I think it's going to help us to run farther as a church. We're going to be able to reach greater places. I actually think that New York's campus is going to prepare us to launch somewhere else, maybe internationally, that God's got for us. So it's getting us ready. I would say don't underestimate the time that it takes to actually build a core team. That's one thing we did. We've underestimated the time. So again, we announced it in December. We're launching in Easter, and we have been working like crazy just to build a core team. And it's a small core team, but it's a great core team. But normally we would give more time to that. The lease up in New York is what kind of forced our hand to move quickly.
Good. Well, we will certainly be praying for that launch. It's going to be an exciting adventure, and it's fun to see how God uses these experiences shape our other work. And I think you may find that that the things you're learning in New York not only are going to impact things you do outside your region, but as you add new campuses in your region as well, I think there'll be some learnings that are going to come from that. Let's kind of switch gears just for a second here at the end, and I'd love to know what you're reading. Anything that's kind of on the front burner that is really impacting your leadership and thinking these days?
Absolutely. One book that I just finished is called Home Run. It's written by my friend Kevin Myers, who's a pastor at 12 Stone, along with John Maxwell. John actually just adds in some thoughts and reflections at the end of each chapter. But Kevin really lays out there that we all want to win in life. We want to win in our relationships. We want to win in our marriage and in our church work, ministry work. We want to hit that home run. And he really lays out the plan, starting with character development, integrity on the inside, and how to serve others, and being effective in ministry. And what I love about the book is Kevin uses great personal stories that most authors do, but the personal stories don't outweigh or overshadow the point that he's trying to make. He does a brilliant job of emphasizing, and I found myself relating to that all along, and it really spoke to me. So the book's called Home Run. It's a great one. My wife and I are also reading right now Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. Again, such a powerful book on stretching us in prayer, causing us to want to pray bolder prayers and bigger prayers, and not giving up in prayer and holding on and believing God for some big stuff. And we're getting ready to lead our church right now through 21 days of prayer and fasting. And it's always a defining moment in the life of our church when we go through this 21 days of fasting together. People that have never hardly heard of the word fasting, much less fasted, jump on board with this just because as a church we're doing it, and we see God move in amazing ways in their life. And so Circle Maker is kind of getting my wife and I ready for what we're going to be leading the church through in this, and we're excited about that. So those are two books I'm eating right now, loving. Both
great titles. Yeah, thanks. Anything else that I haven't asked that you've been dying to tell me about that we need to hear from you?
Well, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I had a pastor friend that walked up to me and he said, "Todd, tell me the one thing at your church you're most excited about." And without even pausing, I realized what it was. And it wasn't that we were launching a new campus in New York or opening up this Dillard store, which those are some big deals. And it wasn't that the budget last year came in way over what we had hoped for. I mean, that's, as a pastor, that's a huge thing, right? What it was our School of Biblical Leadership called Kaleo. Kaleo is a Greek word for called. And several years back, when I was stepping up with my wife to help take on the senior leadership role of the church, when I was in a season of fasting and prayer over all the things I knew God was calling us to, the one thing that was on my whiteboard in my inner office was School of Biblical Leadership. And the Lord just spoke to my heart and said, "Todd, if you do that, you'll be able to do all the other things I'm calling you to do." And Greg, I think what's so great is we're seeing that word come to life and come to truth as now God's calling us to step out and launch. We're going to launch a couple new campuses this year, go into a couple new buildings this year, start some new ministries this year. And because of our School of Leadership, we've got volunteers and staff people equipped and ready to go. They are chomping at the bit to do something great for God. So I'm not even lighting fires under them. They're lighting their own fires and they're going. And it's exciting to see when we cast vision, when we say, okay, we're going to New York, we got teams that have been trained and equipped and volunteers that are saying, I'm going to quit my job and go help build church up in New York City. And Kaleo, our School of Leadership, has had such an integral part of that. It's gotten us ready to obey God. And I would just encourage any pastor or team that doesn't have some system of fully equipping and training their staff and their volunteers and their church in leadership development in a systematic way, pray about an opportunity to jump in and do that, because it is changing the face of our church right now.
It's exciting stuff. Todd, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and love all that you guys are doing. You've got an incredible team, and God's vision is big in your heart and in your mind. And it's just such a joy to walk alongside and to see that vision become a reality as you guys really dig in and make the sacrifices and lead in such a way that your team and the people that God's called you to are really making a huge difference in South Florida, New York City.
New York, yeah, right.
Who knows where next. So thanks again for joining me in the conversation today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.